What is happening to Ontario Student Assistance Program? OSAP rules that have changed in the last few days in Ontario. So this is Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, talking about new OSAP rules and changes that are coming in 2026. So overall, I think there's not going to be much change here that's occurring. It does affect students in terms of not as many grants. So either not as many grants are going to be given to Ontario students, or not as much money going into those grants, right? So if you know anybody that's on OSAP, Ontario Student Assistance Program, you know that basically what happens is the government gives them a certain amount of money to cover their tuition for the course, and then they can also get money for living expenses, travel, that type of thing. So all of that is changing. And one of the major changes is the Ontario government had a freeze on how much colleges could charge for a course. So that freeze has been lifted. So that just means some of the courses might get more expensive in the fall of 2026. Okay, so it's kind of explaining how that's going to work here. And there's a new kind of grant to loan ratio. It just means the money that people used to get from a grant is free money. You don't have to pay it back. The money students used to get from the grant is going to be decreased percentage wise. Okay, so it just means if an older student took a course and they got, let's say they got $7,500 for a course that cost $10,000, it's going to be less than $7,500 now. Okay, so it might be around $2,500 instead of the 7,500. That's the big change that's going to affect students. And it's mentioning that here for private career colleges. So private colleges are going to get less money for grants. They can still get grants, but there's going to be less money in those grants. So just like the example I gave, less money going into the grants, which means the student is going to have to pay back more money in terms of a loan. Okay, so instead of doing these grants, you might see more loans going towards courses, tuition, and expenses of that type of thing. So I think that's the major change here that they're talking about. So negatives, obviously, the negatives are not as many grants or not as much money going into those grants being given. Also, the freeze, so colleges can now increase their tuition. So those two things would be affecting Ontario Student Assistance Program for this upcoming year. Okay, so some interesting things to keep in mind. If you know anybody that is thinking about taking a course, they're going to have to look into how much they're going to be paying, how the loan works, and the parameters around that loan for sure. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.